I was a paramedic for 10 years. I saw a lot of death and destruction in my time, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened on that fateful day. I was called to the scene of a fire. A house had been engulfed in flames and there were people trapped inside. I rushed to the scene and I could see that the fire was already out of control. The flames were licking at the sky and the smoke was so thick that I could barely see. I ran into the burning building and I could hear people screaming for help. I made my way through the smoke and flames and I found a little girl hiding in a closet. I scooped her up and carried her out of the building. I laid the little girl down on the ground and I started CPR. I worked on her for several minutes and finally she started to breathe on her own. I was so relieved. I turned around to see a man standing behind me. He was covered in soot and ash and his eyes were filled with tears. He thanked me for saving his daughter's life. I smiled and nodded. I was just glad that I could help. I turned to leave, but the man stopped me. He asked me if I could stay for a moment. He said that he had something to tell me. I nodded and waited. The man took a deep breath and began to speak. He told me that he was a firefighter and that he had been killed in the fire. He said that he had been watching over me and that he was grateful for what I had done for his daughter. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. The man smiled and said, "Thank you again." And then he was gone. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. I had just seen a ghost. I shook my head and walked away. I didn't know what to think. I went back to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I kept seeing the man's face in my mind. I knew that I had to find out more about him. I went to the library and looked up information about firefighters who had died in the line of duty. I found the man's name, and I learned that he had been killed in a fire a few years ago. He was a hero, and he had saved many lives. I was so grateful that I had been able to save his daughter's life. I knew that it was what he would have wanted. I never saw the man again, but I never forgot him. He was a reminder that there is more to life than we can see. He was a reminder that there is always hope. The next day I went back to the scene of the fire. I wanted to see if I could find any clues about what had happened. I searched the ruins of the house, but I couldn't find anything. I was about to give up when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a small silver object. I picked it up and saw that it was a firefighter's badge. I held the badge in my hand and closed my eyes. I thought about the man I had seen the day before. I knew that it was his badge. I put the badge in my pocket and walked away. I knew that I would never forget the day I saw a ghost. I continued to work as a paramedic, but I never forgot the day I saw the ghost. I often thought about him, and I wondered why he had chosen to appear to me. One day, I was working on a case that reminded me of the ghost. I was called to the scene of a car accident. A young woman had been killed, and her husband was in critical condition. I worked on the husband for several hours, and I was able to save his life. When he woke up, he told me that he had seen his wife standing over him. He said that she had told him that she was okay, and that he needed to be strong. I was stunned. I knew that the husband was a devout Catholic, and I wondered if he had actually seen his wife's ghost. I began to research the paranormal, and I learned that there are many stories of people who have seen ghosts. I also learned that there is no scientific evidence to support the existence of ghosts. I still don't know what to believe. I don't know if I saw a ghost, or if I was just imagining things. But I do know that the experience changed me. I am more open to the possibility of the paranormal now. I know that there are things that we don't understand, and I am not afraid to ask questions. I am grateful for the experience, even though it was strange and unsettling. It made me realize that there is more to life than what we can see. It made me believe in the power of hope. I was a nurse at the hospital for 10 years. I had seen a lot of things in my time there, But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to experience. It was a late night, and I was working the night shift. The hospital was quiet, and I was the only one on my floor. I was making my rounds, checking on my patients, when I heard a noise coming from one of the rooms. I went to investigate, and when I opened the door, I saw a woman standing at the foot of the bed. She was wearing a white dress and her hair was long and black. She was staring at the patient, who was unconscious. I was frozen with fear. I didn't know what to do. The woman turned to look at me, and her eyes were filled with sadness. She reached out her hand, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Help me," she whispered. "I'm lost." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, staring at her. "Please," she said, "help me find my way home." I took a step towards her, and then another. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold and clammy. "I'll help you," I said. I led her out of the room and down the hall. We walked through the empty hospital, and she told me her name was Mary. She said she had died in a car accident and she was lost. I didn't know what to believe, but I felt sorry for her. I wanted to help her find her way home. We walked for what felt like hours. Finally, we came to a door. Mary stopped and looked at me. "This is it," she said. "This is my home." I opened the door, and we stepped inside. The room was dark, but I could see a figure standing in the shadows. "Mommy?" the figure said. Mary ran towards the figure, and they embraced. I stood there, watching them, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I knew that Mary was finally home. I turned and walked away, and I never saw her again. But I'll never forget her. She was the only ghost I ever met, and she changed my life forever. I learned that there is more to this world than what we can see. There are other dimensions, and there are other beings, and sometimes they cross over into our world. I don't know why Mary chose me to help her. Maybe it was because I was a nurse and I was used to helping people, or maybe it was because I was a good person and I had a kind heart. Mary's story had a profound impact on me. It made me realize that there is more to this world than what we can see. It also made me more compassionate and understanding of others. I continued working as a nurse for many years, and I never forgot Mary. I always kept an eye out for other ghosts, but I never saw one again. One day I was working in the emergency room when a young woman was brought in. She had been in a car accident and she was badly injured. I was one of the nurses who worked on her, and I did everything I could to save her life. Unfortunately, the young woman didn't make it. She died on the operating table. I was devastated. I'd never lost a patient before, and it was a very difficult experience for me. I went home that night and cried myself to sleep. I didn't know how I was going to cope with this loss. The next morning I woke up and went to work. I was still feeling sad, but I knew that I had to be strong. I had other patients to care for, and I couldn't let them down. I was working in the ICU when I heard a noise coming from one of the rooms. I went to investigate, and when I opened the door I saw Mary standing at the foot of the bed. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that she was there. "Mary," I said, "is that you?" She smiled. "Yes, it's me," she said. "I'm here to help you." I didn't know what to say. I was still in shock. "I know you're hurting," she said, "but you don't have to be. The young woman is at peace now. She's in a better place." I started to cry. "Thank you," I said. "I needed to hear that." Mary put her arm around me and hugged me. "You're a good nurse," she said. "You're going to make a difference in the world." I smiled. "Thank you," I said. "I'll try my best." Mary smiled back. "I know you will," she said. And then she was gone. I never saw Mary again, but I'll never forget her. She was a special person, and she helped me through a very difficult time in my life. I'm a better nurse because of her. I'm more compassionate and understanding. I know that there is more to this world than what we can see. And I know that there are other beings out there and that they can help us if we let them. I'm grateful for Mary. She changed my life forever. I was working late in the emergency room when I got the call. A little girl had been found unconscious in the woods behind her house. She was only 6 years old and she had been missing for hours. I rushed to the scene, and when I arrived, I could see that the girl was in bad shape. She was pale and her breathing was shallow. I quickly started working on her, but it was clear that she was dying. As I worked, I could feel a presence in the room. It was a small, childlike presence, and it was filled with sadness. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. I continued to work on the girl, but her condition was deteriorating. I knew that I was running out of time. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around and I saw a little girl standing there. She was the same little girl that I had been working on. "Help me," she said. "I'm lost." I took her hand and I led her out of the room. We walked down the hallway and I could feel the presence of the other children all around us. We came to a door and I opened it. We stepped through the door and we were in a different place. It was a beautiful meadow and the sun was shining. "This is my home," the little girl said. "Thank you for bringing me back." She turned to me and she smiled. "I'll never forget you," she said, and then she was gone. I stood there for a moment and I could still feel the presence of the other children. I knew that they were safe now, and I was glad that I had been able to help them. I turned and walked back to the emergency room. I had a lot of work to do, but I knew that I would never forget the little girl who had saved me. The next day, I went back to the woods where the little girl had been found. I wanted to see if I could find any clues about what had happened to her. I searched for hours, but I couldn't find anything. I was about to give up when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a small white flower. I picked it up and I held it in my hand. I could feel the warmth of the sun on my face and I could hear the sound of birds singing in the trees. I knew that I would never forget the little girl who had saved me. She had shown me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. I took the flower home and put it in a vase. I looked at it every day, and it reminded me of the little girl. A few weeks later, I was working in the emergency room when I saw a familiar face. It was the little girl's mother. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my daughter's life." I smiled. "It was my pleasure," I said. The little girl's mother told me that her daughter had been playing in the woods when she had gotten lost. She had been wandering around for hours before she was found. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there," the little girl's mother said. "You're a hero." I blushed. "I'm just a doctor," I said, but the little girl's mother wouldn't let me off the hook. "You're a hero," she said again, "and I'll never forget what you did for my daughter." I thanked the little girl's mother again, and then I went back to work. But I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. Was I a hero? I didn't think so. I was just a doctor doing my job. But then I thought about the little girl. She had been lost and scared, and I had helped her find her way home. Maybe I was a hero after all. I continued to work in the emergency room for many years. I saw many children come and go, and I helped save many lives. But I never forgot the little girl who had saved me. She had taught me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope.